Hey everyone, I'm Sara Harberson. I'm America's College Counselor. This is a Facebook Live, a rapid fire Facebook Live. So I'm going to be answering college admissions questions for anyone who has them, students, parents, guardians, counselors, aunts, uncles, whoever's helping the student through the admissions process, even school counselors as well. So you are able to ask questions in this Facebook Live, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and it's good to be back. I should mention that I try to do Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives along the way. Hey, Rachel. We see some familiar names in the lives, but I also run Application Nation, which is an online college counseling community. So if you need more support in the admissions process, you can definitely check out Application Nation. I will say that our older group, our seniors, the Application Nation class of 2026, that group will be closing on October 1st. So 2 weeks from today, Application Nation class of 2026 will close. So if you're trying to get in to help with finishing up your college list or your essays or what to do about submitting applications, make sure to join between now and October 1st. There's also a younger group as well, Application Nation, for those freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. But this is a great opportunity to get some questions asked, especially if you are curious. My background is my entire career has been in college admissions and college counseling. I've worked for colleges and universities as a dean of admission. I've been the director of college counseling at a high school, but the last third of my career, I've been working for all of you and writing weekly blogs and providing free resources and doing these lives and running Application Nation. So why don't we get started? Because I think there's a bunch of you that have joined in the last 2 minutes, and I want to see what questions you have on your mind. All right, so here's the first one. What are the key differences between early decision 1 and early decision 2 for schools, especially Davidson and Vanderbilt? Okay, so early decision is a binding program that a college or university can have, not all do. They're mostly private colleges and private universities, although there are a couple of public universities that have early decision as well, like William & Mary and the University of Virginia. But when you apply early decision, you are signing a binding agreement that if you get admitted, you will enroll. So because of that, there are advantages when a student applies early decision. And the acceptance rate in early decision tends to be higher than the college's regular decision acceptance rate, or if they have early action, it tends to be higher than the college's early action acceptance rate. But there are some colleges and universities that have 2 rounds of early decision. So some things to keep in mind. Both rounds of early decision, if a college has 2 rounds, it is a fraction of the size of the college's or university's regular decision applicant pool or early action applicant pool. But between early decision 1 and early decision 2, I would say ED1 is going to be bigger than the ED2 pool. The acceptance rates, generally speaking, for a college or university that offers 2 rounds of early decision will be somewhat similar, sometimes very similar, sometimes the exact same acceptance rate, sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower. But for a college like Vanderbilt especially, Vanderbilt, even though we don't know for sure because these colleges, they don't share the acceptance rate between ED1 and ED2, but what we've heard through the grapevine for decades now is that Vanderbilt's ED2 pool is extremely competitive and selective. And it kind of makes sense, right? You know, maybe a student who applied early decision to Duke or restrictive early action to Harvard who doesn't get in that early round may say to themselves, well, I'm going to apply ED2 to Vanderbilt and walk right in. But it tends to be a super competitive pool, especially for Vanderbilt. We also know that Emory has a very competitive ED2 pool, but generally speaking, if a college has ED1 and ED2, similar acceptance rates, ED1 being a little bit bigger than ED2, but still, if you apply early decision and you're objectively competitive for that college or university, your chances of admission are going to increase. The trend of increasing SAT and ACT scores in the various percentile bands was clearly increasing before, let me get to the top there, right, Rachel, so I don't miss anything, was clearly increasing before test optional policies, but I think I was just as clear that test optional significantly accelerated those increases. I tend to agree, yeah. Now that more and more schools are moving away from test optional, can the class of 2027 or even 2026 expect a slowing or even reversal of this increase? This has real implications for those of us trying to figure out when is enough for our students to stop trying to eke out those few extra points at the expense of many other things they could be doing in a busy junior year. I couldn't agree more. On a very related note, does AN offer any personalized way to get advice on whether a score is high enough? Tara at Franklin Yard. Yes, Franklin Yard is our test prep partner, and Tara is a really good place to start there. Tara was very specific. They will counsel on likelihood of gains and ways to get gains, but not whether it was in our students' personal best interest to try for them. Okay, so yes, we are seeing that some of the colleges, especially the more selective, the elite colleges and universities that adopted a test optional policy during the pandemic, some of them, not all of them, some of them have reinstated the standardized testing requirement, meaning that students have to submit an SAT or an ACT. But Rachel's right. Since the pandemic hit, we have seen average SAT and ACT scores of admitted students increase at a lot of these highly selective elite colleges and universities. And we believe, most of us believe, that a lot of it has to do with the test optional policies. A student who has a slightly lower score may not report it. But now that some of these colleges are reinstating the SAT or ACT, will those averages start to even out? Will they continue to rise? Will they be a little bit lower? I think among the elite colleges and universities, they are so used to getting those high average scores, and they've gotten used to it, especially the last couple of years, that we're not going to see those averages go down. And that is because standardized test scores have always meant a lot in college admissions, but they mean more now than ever before. So I believe that, especially among the highly selective colleges and universities, we're going to see those average SAT and ACT scores continue to stay pretty much the same, or maybe even a little bit higher. We might see a little bit of a dip, but not one that we really feel. So when is the right time to stop taking these tests? You know, I recommend at the most 3 times. You can take more than that, but when you start taking more than that, it starts to take time away from other things like schoolwork and activities and having a normal, balanced teenage life. And so I like to take 3 tests, or recommend 3 tests, and I like them to be spread out. So maybe once during junior year, or maybe twice during junior year, and maybe a 3rd time in the summer between junior and senior year, or a 3rd time right at the beginning of senior year. We know a lot of times that 3rd test in late summer or early fall of senior year tends to be a student's highest score. Do we weigh in on test scores in Application Nation? Absolutely. So there are a lot of opportunities for you to ask my opinion on whether the student has the score that they need. I give families all of the student classifications so that you know if you fit into this student classification, these are the colleges that you can apply to. And these are the test scores that you really need, because we have so much data from our students who are getting admitted that we know what the score is, what that magic score is. Now, it can be a little bit lower if you're coming from an underrepresented state or you're coming from an underrepresented background, absolutely. But for the most part, we want students to have the score they need to be the most competitive. So We help you along the way, every step, every stage of the process, whether you're just joining, whether you want a college list review, we would say, this is where your score is now. If you get it up 10 points higher, you're going to be in a much more competitive position. Therefore, we recommend that you take it one more time, for example. So yes, Franklin Yard and other test prep companies are going to help you and tell you what kind of score you would get based on the information they have available and what they're offering you. But Application Nation, me, myself, and our team, we're going to be able to tell you this is the score you need to get into this set of colleges. We also know, we have the data to prove it, that if you're applying to the more selective colleges without test scores, because they are still test optional, we can tell you it is significantly harder to get into those colleges, those elite colleges, without test scores if they are still test optional. Hi, Fawn. Aloha to you. I always see Fawn on these Facebook Lives. I really appreciate it. All right, next question. If my high school considers journalism towards the 4-year core English requirement, will colleges accept it as well? Okay. Journalism is more of an elective college in the eyes of those colleges and universities. So yes, your high school could count it as your English class in a given year, but most admissions officers would count it as an elective. They want those more traditional classes like Honors English 1, Honors English 2, AP Language, AP Literature. They want those more traditional core English classes instead. If you have room in your schedule and you want to take journalism, absolutely. But I wouldn't count it as your core English class, and most colleges wouldn't either, even if your high school does. What would you advise a junior who didn't have much in terms of extracurriculars their first 2 years of high school? You got plenty of time. So what I would think about, you're at the beginning of junior year, do you have a few activities that are offered through your high school? That's important. You know why? Because colleges want students who have invested and given back and gotten involved at their high school. There are going to be some students that, just do activities outside their high school, and sometimes that looks like, they don't care about their high school community. So the first thing you can do is join a couple of clubs at the beginning of junior year. Then look to see, do I have any community service on my list currently? And if you don't, consider an organization that is offered through your high school or in your community that you can volunteer at. And if you volunteer at that organization or that club for 11th and 12th grade, then you have 2 full years of community service at the same organization, which can build up impact in hours and weeks. You can also think about what major you're thinking about listing on your college applications. It's always great to have evidence to support that major on your activities list. So let's say, for example, you want to be an English major. Could you write for your local newspaper or the neighborhood newsletter in your community? Or could you be a part of the newspaper at your high school or yearbook? That's a great way to show some evidence for English. Or you can even, write on your own. That can be an independent pursuit that you can list as an activity. Having a job can also be an activity, family responsibilities. You'd be surprised what is considered an activity, but there are a lot of great options and you have plenty of time to do it. And you also want to be thinking about summer, the summer between junior and senior year. That's a great way to get a job, volunteer if you don't have time to do it during the school year, or do something that directly relates to your major choice. Marisa, oh my gosh. That's been a long time. So I used to work with Marisa when we were working in the undergraduate admissions office at the University of Pennsylvania. She was an amazing admissions officer. We need to connect. It's been a long time. Great to see you here. All right, Fawn has a question. I'm wondering if my son should add his Q1 grades in his additional information section if they are strong, because his counselor won't add it to his early decision application. Okay, there are going to be some early decision and early action schools or programs that require first quarter grades of senior year. And if that's the case, we want the school counselor to send those grades when they become available to your early decision school or early action school. I tell students though, if they are permitted and you did really well first quarter of senior year, ask your counselor to send them. So hopefully, Vaughn, your son's counselor will send them on their own. If not, and he knows what they are before he submits his application, yes, he could list them in the additional information section if he has them available. Another way a lot of times is once you get your admissions portal information, a lot of colleges and universities will allow the student to update their application. And so that can be another way that he can submit his first quarter grades, especially if he submits his application and finds out his grades after he does that. Kara asks, should students submit SAT scores if they are in the middle 50%, but on the lower end within the middle 50%? Yeah, this is a question that a lot of families have. So a couple things. I really appreciate when colleges provide admissions data right on their admissions website, like what is the middle 50% range of SAT or ACT scores for admitted students. That is the best way to kind of see how your scores compare to those who are admitted. If your scores are within the middle 50% range, you want to then be considering when you're applying, right? Because if you're applying early decision, the acceptance rate is higher. They're going to be more generous in early decision. And so if they are within the middle 50% range, but a little bit lower and you're applying early decision, they could look stronger than if you applied regular decision. You also want to consider your major choice, right? Certain majors and programs are going to be a lot more competitive than others. Certain majors and programs expect higher SAT and ACT scores. For example, engineering programs, almost always, those students who get admitted for engineering tend to have the higher SAT and ACT scores. So if you're applying to engineering or you're applying to business, another super competitive program at most colleges and universities, I would say you want to be on the higher end of that middle 50% range or even above it. Great question. If the grandparents set up a 529 for the grandkids and are the owners and have named the kids, oh, this is getting complicated, Sabrina, I hope I can answer it. It's about the FAFSA and financial aid, and I have named the kids as beneficiaries. Will that still count under our parents' assets for FAFSA? I really don't know that question, the answer to that question, Sabrina. The best place to get that answered is to call the financial aid office at one of the colleges on your list. I find that the financial aid officers in the financial aid office on college campuses tend to be really helpful with a question like that. And I would say they're even more helpful than the admissions office. So I would contact one of the financial aid offices and talk to a financial aid officer, someone who works in that office. The other thing about assets, I have to be honest, every college can look at them or count them differently or not count them at all. So it's important to ask the individual college what their policy is. Do you determine if you should submit your SAT scores with application or hold if they are required? I'm not sure what that exactly means, but you know, when you're deciding whether or not to report test scores for a test optional college, I would look at that most recent admissions profile on the admissions website before you submit the application. That's the best plan. There are going to be some colleges and universities, especially the public universities, where once you submit your application, sometimes you're not allowed to update it with test scores. So just keep that in mind. So you want to make it a thoughtful decision before you submit. I hope I answered your question. What predictions do you have for a college admissions cycle this year? Do you discuss your diverse community? Yeah, this is going to be this is going to be an interesting year. There have been a lot of changes. There are a lot of changes to Common App this year. There are a lot of changes to what's going on in our industry. There is a big target on the backs of the well-known, highly respected, highly selective universities. I'm going to be honest. And so if you are applying to those types of colleges, like Ivy League institutions or Ivy type institutions, you have to be aware of the fact that they've got a big target on their backs. They are being threatened with investigations. They're being threatened with grant money or research money being taken away from them. And so they need to be super, super careful. What I am recommending to all of my students, whether they are an underrepresented minority in an applicant pool or a majority student, either way, I'm telling them, do not discuss their race, their culture, their heritage, their ethnicity in their essays in the application. That goes for the main essay and supplemental essays. I hate to tell my students that they cannot write about their cultural, racial, or heritage in essays, but I think you have to be really careful, because especially those highly selective universities, if they get an essay from a student that's talking about their background, what are they going to do? They got to be super careful. They either need to ignore that essay or just not count it at all. And so I'm telling my students not to write about it, just to be safe. So I think colleges and universities in general are going to be super, super careful, because they can't use race to admit a student or deny a student. So to make it as clean and fair as possible, that's why I'm telling students not to write about their backgrounds in that way. I think that even though we're beginning to see that demographic shift, less high school graduates, less students applying to college, I don't think we're going to feel that difference this year. I think it's still going to be a very competitive admission cycle. And as I mentioned earlier to Rachel, especially with the more selective colleges, I think average test scores for admitted students is going to remain high. Let's see what other questions you have. How important is the 2 years of language versus maybe taking a different language versus the same one for 2 to 4 years? Okay. Remember when we were talking about taking your 5 core academic classes for all 4 years? The 5 core academic classes includes language, whether it's a world language or an ancient language. You really should be taking the same language throughout high school, because you're trying to build as much proficiency and trying to build a strong foundation for that language as much as possible when you apply to college. Because almost every college in the country is going to have a language requirement when you get there. And these colleges want you to have the most foundation going into college. You could potentially test out, you could take a placement exam and get into a higher level class. So it's really important to stick with the same language through high school, and ideally take that language 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade if possible. That's what colleges really want to see. Is there a good reason to apply early action versus regular decision? Yeah, I think there is. You know, the challenge though is we don't know what the acceptance rate is in early action versus regular decision for most colleges. Most colleges are not going to provide that information. Most colleges, they don't want to provide much information to the public. There are a couple of colleges that do provide that information, and I really respect them for that. Georgetown's one of them. They make it clear that their acceptance rate in early action and regular decision is very similar. I appreciate that information. But there are advantages, even if the acceptance rate between early action and regular decision is very similar. You want to think about the other benefits to that. At the beginning of senior year, and you are working on your applications and writing essays, your motivation is high because you want to do a great job. as the school year goes on, your motivation starts to decrease. You could even get some senioritis in there. So your best work on these essays and these applications is actually at the beginning of senior year in the fall, when those early action deadlines happen. The other advantage to applying early action is you are going to hear back about an admissions decision earlier than if you apply regular decision. But not all early action programs are going to release their decisions before regular decision hits. So if you're applying to a restrictive early action or single choice early action program, like the ones at Harvard and Yale and Stanford and Princeton and Georgetown and Notre Dame and MIT and Caltech, for example, those schools are going to notify you before winter break, like mid-December. But a lot of the other early action programs, they tend to wait until January, sometimes mid-January, sometimes late January. Regular decision deadlines will have passed by then, but still, you would find out earlier than if you apply regular decision. So I think there are a lot of advantages, and I think the reality is that for the most part, if a school has early action and regular decision, we don't know for sure, but almost always their acceptance rate is going to be a little bit higher in early action than it is in regular. That is an educated guess, though. Hi, Leanne. Hi, Lee. Thank you so much for that comment. Lee used to be my neighbor. She moved about 10 minutes away, but I saw her Friday night. Oh, that's so cool she's here. All right, another question. These kids are much younger. They're not ready for college just yet, but soon enough. There are lots of schools with 25,000 plus students, but my daughter thinks that is too big for her. We're having trouble finding schools in the 12K to 25K. Can you suggest some in that range? It really depends on what kinds of schools, where. Let me think about this. All right. So some colleges in the 12K to 25K range. That's a hard range, to be honest. All right. So I would say that some of the larger private universities are going to get up there, but it tends to be still public universities. I would say University of Delaware. It's a public university, but it's not going to feel too big. Northeastern University is a private university in Boston. Where else can I recommend? Wake Forest in North Carolina. It's probably a little bit lower, but it definitely has that university feel and that rah-rah feel in Division I sports. Let me think of Southern Methodist University in Texas. Chapman in California. Pepperdine in California. I have no idea if these schools are a good fit, but what else? Yeah, I would say some of those. If you don't like those huge schools, you want to be careful of University of Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. Those are, and some of the UCs are really large. But you'd be surprised. You're going to find a lot of public universities that are in that range, not too small, not too big. But if you have a specific geographic area, I can definitely help a little bit more. My son is a very high achieving junior, but has no motivation to start planning for college. Any advice? Just be patient. Couple things. I was a school counselor for a number of years, and it was at an independent school, a very high achieving independent school. And obviously there were students that, wanted to talk about college, from the moment they started high school, but you'd be surprised. There were a lot of high achieving students that were doing a great job in school, were getting involved with activities, doing all the right things, but they just weren't ready. They weren't ready to visit college campuses. They weren't ready necessarily to take the SAT, ACT this early in junior year. By the way, it's super early. So I would just say be patient, because if your son is high achieving, he's thinking about college, but he's just not ready to fully go all in. I would say though, by spring break of junior year, I want at least one scheduled official SAT or ACT on the books, or planning to do that. And it would be great to start visiting some colleges, and I would start local. And so sometimes those local colleges and universities that are a short distance from your home are less intimidating. So that's a great way to get started. Yeah, so it's okay. It's all gonna fall into place. They're gonna get interested. Sometimes it happens in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. Sometimes it kicks in right at the beginning of senior year. I also notice, and it's not to gender stereotype, just I've been doing this for a long time, that sometimes the male students take a little bit longer than the female students, but they come around. And if they're not ready to apply to a 4-year college or university, look at the community college in your community, in your area, because you can save a lot of money. The student can get their feet wet, and then they can apply to a 4-year college after their first year or possibly after their second year. A lot of people are surprised about community colleges and transfer students. Even when I worked at the University of Pennsylvania with Marisa, who was on the Facebook Live earlier, in the transfer process, we saw a lot of students who were going to community college for a variety of reasons. And if they did well, they had a really good shot of getting into Penn. So it doesn't matter where you come from, it's what you do while you are there. Daughter has favorites of Northeastern and Brown, both reach schools. Yeah, I agree. Good, you're aware of that. Oops, just lost you there. Just trying to expand it. But she's hesitant for early decision, afraid she might find out more information. Any advice? Well, I assume she's a senior. And early decision is really, if she is truly and objectively competitive for Brown or Northeastern, applying early decision is going to give her a leg up. A lot of times the acceptance rate in early decision is going to be at least twice as high as it is in regular decision or early action and regular decision. So it is a smart plan, but you have to be ready to commit to it. I don't think you can feel 100% about anything in life. I think there are always going to be doubts, but I would say, if we get into October and she's still thinking about these 2 schools, it's a pretty good sign. The other thing to think about is Brown has 1 round of early decision and it's more competitive than Northeastern. And so I would probably say apply early decision to Brown, and then if that doesn't work out, apply early decision 2 to Northeastern. When I tell my students in Application Nation, always be considering early decision 2, I think that's really important. But if you don't get admitted to your early decision 1 school or your early decision school or your restrictive early action school, and you're thinking about an early decision 2 program, you should be considering an early decision 2 program that has a higher overall acceptance rate than the school that you got deferred or denied from, right? That's going to give you your best shot. You don't want to be in a position where you don't get into early decision 1 and then you don't get in early decision 2. That can really impact a student's confidence. So that ED2 choice should be a college that is a little bit more generous in admissions than that ED1 school that you apply to, for example. Lee, you are so funny. All right, next question. Oh, Alfia, nice to see you here. All right, I love seeing familiar names of AN families. All right, does Common App's responsibilities and circumstances section question about commuting and the 60 minutes refer to 60 minutes each way, 60 minutes to school, and 60 minutes from school? Thank you, Sarah. This is a really good question. And my team and I actually hopped on a Zoom call this morning to talk about this section. Responsibilities and circumstances, a new section in Common App this year. You're going to find it right after the activities list. I actually shot a video or reel right before my Zoom call for Application Nation tonight, so we'll probably post that in the next couple of days. You'll find it right after your activities list, and you basically need to check off any boxes that pertain to you. So if you have responsibilities in your family that amount to 4 hours or more a week, you can check off one of those boxes, like helping out a younger sibling, or driving a family member to appointments, or even being an interpreter or a translator for someone in your family. Those are the responsibilities. There's about 10 or 11 of them. The circumstances one includes some serious hardships, like have you experienced homelessness, or do you not have access to, heat or power or water or food on a regular basis? But one of the options under circumstances relates to commute time for school. The way that I'm interpreting that option, Althea, is 60 minutes total a day of commute time from your house to school and back. So that could mean 30 minutes to school, 30 minutes home, as long as it amounts to 60 minutes total. And it's not just driving, and it's not just a bus. I used to cover New York City when I worked at Penn, and there were some students, especially the students going to some of the specialized high schools like Bronx Science or Stuyvesant or Brooklyn Tech. A lot of times they were coming from a different borough. They were taking a bus, they were taking a train, then they would need to walk, and it really, really added up. The reason why Common App has added the responsibilities and circumstances section is because they want to give students an opportunity to identify things that they're dealing with on a regular basis that could potentially impact academics and activities. So for example, those New York City kids, maybe they were coming from, maybe they were coming from Staten Island and they were going to Bronx Science in New York, and they had a really long commute. That could impact the number of activities that they were doing, and frankly, the number of hours and weeks that they were committing to activities. So that's why these questions are being asked. There's no place to explain your responsibilities in detail or the circumstances in detail in that section. But what I would recommend is, if you have a lot of family responsibilities, you can list them as activities, especially like if you're working for your family business but you're not getting paid, or you're helping your family business but you're not getting paid. List that as one of your activities on your activities list. If you're dealing with a pretty serious circumstance, I would recommend that you consider writing an essay about it, or you can use a section later on in the application called Challenges and Circumstances, and it'll give you a box where you can write up to 250 words. So the new section, Responsibilities and Circumstances, it's literally a list. You just check off boxes. Most students, though, are going to check off the box that says none of these. None of these responsibilities pertain to me. None of these circumstances I have faced. So I think even though this is the first year, I can pretty much guarantee you most students who are living a pretty regular life and they don't have a lot of challenges, family challenges, financial challenges, home life challenges, they're going to select none of these for responsibilities and for the circumstances question. Oh, these questions are so good. What are your thoughts on the Elon Queens merger? Oh my God, these are such good questions. So yesterday, I believe, Elon University announced that it would be merging, or basically taking over, Queens University in Charlotte. We've seen this happen throughout the country. For example, Northeastern University in Boston acquired the campus of Mills College in Oakland, California several years ago. I think Northeastern acquired a smaller institution in New York City too. So this is happening. It's not happening very often. I'm thinking just in Pennsylvania, Villanova acquired a small Catholic college. I think it was Rosemont recently. So a bigger, more financially resourced institution sometimes will merge or take over a smaller institution that is struggling financially. what do I think about Elon and Queens? I think Queens has been struggling for a long time. And so it makes sense that Elon is making a move here. I also think that Elon is showing some signs and characteristics of like a Northeastern. They are being very entrepreneurial. They are a very hot school. And we've seen it become increasingly popular among high school students to consider, not just students from North Carolina or students from the South, but students from all over the country. So I think it is a power move, to be honest. The other thing about acquiring Queens is Queens has some graduate programs, so it can really expand Elon's offerings. So those are some thoughts on it. We're not going to see this happen a tremendous amount, just because, being a college and university is an expensive endeavor, and it's hard to be financially sound and successful right now. But I applaud Elon for making the move, and we'll have to kind of wait and see how it evolves. But it's probably going to take a couple of years for Elon and Queens to really come together fully. Let me try to answer maybe one more question. Oh, hi, Mopsy. Younger son, Ben. Oh, I can't wait. He's 2028. That's wonderful. My son, Max, is 2028. I remember your first son. Really cool. Let's see if I can try to answer a question. If your student does not have a clear favorite school, what criteria is the most important in identifying which school to apply early decision? It has to go with, is the student really in love with that school? They need to be pretty darn positive, and it's hard to be 100%, but they need to be positive. I also think it's important to have good data in front of you. There's a great chart. It's really like an early decision chart, and it's put together by a group of independent private counselors. They're using public data that colleges provide on their websites through the Common Data Set, but it's a really great chart if you can get your hands on it. I showed it to my Application Nation Class of 2026 group last Tuesday, because we're talking a lot about early decision and early action. And on the chart, there's a column. There's a column for the acceptance rate in early decision, so that's really helpful, and the acceptance rate for regular decision. But there's also a column that indicates what percentage of the class, the freshman class, is filled through early decision. That's really revealing. There are some colleges with early decision that are filling at least half of their class through early decision, and this is a fraction of the size of regular decision's applicant pool. And then there's some colleges that are filling 60+% of their incoming freshman class through early decision. So if you can get your hands on that chart, I have it and I shared it with our AN families, but if you can get your hands on the most recent chart, it can really give you great insight into how powerful early decision can be. And how much a college relies on it, even though it's a smaller applicant pool, because those students are committed to going. Something we want to be aware of, and this will be my last point, really important. Someone asked what are my predictions this year? And we talked a little bit about testing. We talked a lot about race. One thing we didn't talk about is that there is a lawsuit that was filed in August against a number of, I want to say it was about 14 or 15 colleges and universities with early decision, accusing them of colluding and giving advantages to students who apply early decision. So there are some Ivy League schools on there, like the University of Pennsylvania, and some other small liberal arts colleges like Haverford that have early decision that were named in this lawsuit. So what impact is that going to have on those colleges that were named in the lawsuit? Well, you can pretty much guarantee that those institutions that were named in the lawsuit They still have early decision. They haven't gotten rid of it. They're probably going to reduce the number of students they're filling through early decision this year. They can't reduce it too much because they rely on it. You know, their yield rate is 100% in early decision or very close to it. And their yield rate in regular decision is going to drop significantly. So they need to still fill a decent percentage of their freshman class through early decision. But I would say those colleges, especially the colleges that were named in the lawsuit, are probably going to reduce the percentage a little bit this coming year. And I think to some extent, early decision, you know, has a target on its back as well, because there are so many advantages given in early decision, and not every student is able to apply early decision. If you apply early decision, you're basically saying whatever financial aid package, whatever you give me is fine. I'm going to enroll. Yes, there is an appeals process, but for the most part, you know, you've got to accept that you're not going to be able to compare offers of admission. You're not going to be able to compare financial aid offers and merit scholarships the way that you want. So if money is a very big issue, early decision may not be the right choice for you. So that's another trend that I'm seeing. But with early decision, your heart has to be in it. You need to visit that campus, in my opinion, to know for sure that you should apply early decision. You should feel really good about it going into the fall of senior year. Will you have doubts? You're always going to have little doubts here or there, but for the most part, if 90% of the time you're feeling really good about that school, and we know it's going to be a higher acceptance rate, and if that college fills a significant portion of the freshman class through early decision, it's something you really want to consider before you reach those deadlines. And those deadlines are going to be around November 1st. All right, it's 10:16 here on the East Coast. I got to make sure my kids are headed to bed. I got to eat some dinner. I got to wrap up the night. We had such a great crowd here, well over 200 watching live and asking questions. We had families from every grade level. I had some neighbors join in, some local people, some former colleagues, some AN families. It's been great to have you all here. I hope that this has been helpful. I've got something coming that is a little bit of a surprise. I hope it all falls into place, but if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen next week, and we will announce it in the next couple of days. So a big surprise coming, and I hope you'll be able to join me. If not, I will see you next time for a Facebook Live. Have a great night, everybody, and have a great year. Bye-bye.